Well, I'm wearing my lucky $300 titty top.
I hope that's a lucky $300 titty top, because you sure ain't got no titties.
This wasn't a love story. This was a power trip. I watched HavPlenty back in the day, and I thought it was just a quirky little indie romance. Plus, I wasn't even a teenager at that point, so I really didn't understand what was going on. But rewatching it now, child, the things I noticed. Haviland wanted control. She spent the entire movie talking down on Lee, telling everyone how he wasn't shit, calling him a liar, making sure nobody took him seriously. But the second she realized other women were interested in him, suddenly she wasn't so sure. She pulled him in just to push him away, kept him close but never let him have her, tested him, toyed with him, and when he finally walked away, suddenly she needed him. Haviland was exhausting. Lee was down bad. Caroline, unhinged. And this entire situation, a mess. Before I get too deep into it, you already know I have a lot to say about this movie. But first, it's time to recap. So let's get into it. The movie starts off with us seeing a home video of Haviland and her ex-fiancé, Michael. We meet Lee, Haviland's friend and current house sitter. For some reason, he's sitting on her couch watching this home video of hers. When Haviland calls to check in, she invites him down to her mother's house for New Year's Eve since he has nothing better to do. Lee is currently homeless, pretty much down on his luck, and he's going through a mean case of writer's block. When he arrived to Haviland's mom's house, Haviland welcomed him in her own icy way. Haviland's personality it could be a bit polarizing.
You heard of him? Quentin introduced us. Quentin Tarantino.
Excuse me, you dropped something.
What did I drop?
A name.
You know, every time I start talking about somebody successful, you start tripping.
I'm not getting defensive. You're just showing off.
As he gets settled into his room, one of Haviland's friends, Caroline, comes through. Caroline was a trip. You will see what I mean in just a little bit. From the moment she arrived, she asked Lee 1,000,001 questions. We learned that Lee is currently homeless because his book deal fell through and he didn't renew his lease, thinking he'd be able to get a better place once his book was released. Also, Lee had a bad habit of being self-deprecating.
What do you do when you have a date?
I don't really date that much anymore.
Shit, flat broke and living in your car. I wouldn't go out with you either.
Despite Lee's situation, Caroline was interested. She talks to Haviland to learn more about Lee. As she's trying to get the details and see if Lee was worth pursuing, Haviland tells her that she invited Lee down out of charity, he's not gay, and that he's free for her to pursue. While they're talking, Haviland's sister, Lee, spelled differently of course, arrives and she meets Lee for herself. Lee is a newlywed. She's only been married for about a month. Meanwhile, Haviland was upstairs with Caroline telling all of Lee's business.
Not only is he full of shit, but the brother won't even get a real job, okay?
He'd be pissed if he heard you say that.
No, he wouldn't. But if he did, fuck him. Fuck him, fuck him, fuck him, fuck him.
Downstairs, Lee and Lee continue talking. She assumes that Lee and her sister were dating. That wasn't the case. Caroline mentions she'll be wearing her $300 titty top to make her move on Lee. Why did Haviland say this?
Well, I'm wearing my lucky $300 titty top.
I hope that's a lucky $300 titty top, because you sure ain't got no titties.
For her to hate self-deprecation, she sure doesn't mind heading out insults. Haviland finally comes down to ask Lee to take her to go get something to eat. She said this in front of the wrong crowd though, because now everyone wanted her to bring something back. When Haviland's mom talks through the intercom, she informs them she's leaving and informs Haviland that Michael, her ex-fiancé, was on the phone. Haviland walks away to take her call, and Lee asks the others if Michael and Haviland had been in contact this entire time. And yes, they had. He'd even bought her the leather jacket she was wearing. Apparently, Haviland told Lee something different, so he swiftly followed behind her to see what was up, leaving Caroline in the dust. Red flag. Abort mission. Meanwhile, Haviland was going at it with Michael.
Do I look like a biscuit to you? Do I look like a biscuit to you? Do I look like a fucking french fry? Then why are you trying to play me like a side order?
Lee confronts Haviland for lying about Michael. As they drive to get something to eat, Haviland tried to deflect, but Lee didn't let her.
I'm not with Michael.
You got the motherfucker's coat on, you got his picture up in your house. It looks like a duck and it sounds like a duck. It's a duck, baby.
Back at the house, Caroline told Lee that she was plotting to make her move on Lee. Lee asked if it was cool with Haviland, and Caroline told her that she didn't mind. The fact that her own sister asked if it would be a problem was a red flag. Again, abort mission. Don't even do it. Lee and Haviland were still bickering. Now they were arguing about Lee lying about his father dying. He didn't lie on purpose. He received a call from the hospital and he jumped the gun. But Haviland used this to justify her not telling Lee about her still talking to Michael. Haviland mentioned how Lee was easily distracted. She complained about this, but you will see in just a little bit how she used this quality to get what she wanted. Haviland, Lee, and her husband Felix, Caroline, and Lee have a fun New Year's Eve. After Haviland asked to borrow Lee's car so she could take Felix and Lee home, Lee opted to stay back so he could get some rest so he could leave the next morning. Caroline finally got her moment with Lee, and child, Lee was not impressed. Caroline was such a character.
How come you don't go out on dates?
That's just the way things worked out.
Wait. I just exhaled.
Lee could feel that Caroline was not worth the risk. As strong as she was coming, it would never be strong enough to crack Lee. Unfortunately, she had to learn this the hard way.
Are you making a pass at me?
That depends on what happens in the next 5 seconds.
5 seconds is over.
Listen, it was after this that Caroline went completely off the rails. This one rejection put her down in a very bad way. Wait for it. That night, Lee has a dream that he and Haviland were having a romantic dinner, but when it came time for him to speak, he spit out teeth. Dreaming of spitting out teeth or losing teeth can mean many things, but mostly loss of power or control, feeling stressed, or having communication issues. All of these things come into play when it comes to Lee and Haviland. The next day, Haviland asked him to come to brunch with her family and a friend, Andrea Beaumont, who looked so much like Lauryn Hill. Check out Caroline's look. Up here looking like she crawled out of a scene of Edward Scissorhands. That rejection is truly weighing heavy on her mind and heart. Now, Haviland told Lee that she needed a buffer from Andrea, but it seemed like she really needed a buffer from Andrea and her dad asking about Michael. Apparently, Michael was this big singer who made such hits as
40 ounces of love, so inebriating, girl, I'm getting drunk on you.
double copper status. Haviland capes hard for her boo and his lack of lyricism, calling him the next Marvin Gaye. Child, she wished. Her family, well, at least her dad and maybe her sister, didn't know that there was trouble in paradise for her and Michael. Andrea brings up what she heard in the tabloids about Michael and Jada Pinkett. Lee does Haviland a solid by degrading himself for a laugh and bringing attention back on him. Tell me why Caroline pet a dead cat that Haviland's dad had in the back of his car, so she rushed home to soak her hand in antiseptic and pickle juice. We'll get back to that later. And no, we never learned why her daddy was riding around with a dead cat in his car. We meet another one of Haviland's friends, Bobby. Lee learns that Haviland told Bobby that Lee was charming, but also a pathological liar. Meanwhile, Haviland was in her feelings about Michael.
When I see that motherfucker in a suit and I hear his songs and I listen to his voice, I must be addicted to him.
I don't know, Hav.
Lee learns that Haviland offered her sister a job as her personal assistant back in New York, even though Felix was making bank down in DC. Lee confronts Haviland about it, and you already know Haviland didn't take too kindly to being put on the spot.
First off, I'm offering my sister a job. I am doing her a favor. She'll make more money working for me than she will working for anybody in DC. Secondly, this is between me and my sister.
Haviland insists that she was just trying to offer her sister a job, but Lee wasn't trying to hear it.
Hey, fine, Iceberg Slim. You don't see nothing wrong with what you're doing.
Wait a minute, who do you think you are that you can talk to me like that?
Who you think you are that I can't?
Upstairs, Caroline was still being Caroline. She commits a sin by reading this sign and this one and still doing what the sign told her not to do. Her intrusive thoughts won. I would have kicked her out immediately. Somehow, Haviland convinced Lee to stay even longer to take her to see her grandmother. While they are there, Haviland's grandmother asks Lee 1,000,001 questions about his book. He tells her that while he's going through writer's block, he still plans to have his book finished soon. While he tells her this, Haviland draws on a piece of paper.
What's this?
That's you.
Why is my nose a foot long?
Because you're a liar.
Why is my groin inflamed?
Because your pants are on fire.
Haviland's grandmother pulls her to the side and tells her that Lee is her future husband. Haviland brushed her off, but her grandmother insisted that it was a fact, whether she wanted to believe it or not. When they make it back home, Lee asks to speak with Haviland, but Haviland brushes her off for work. So Lee agreed to take Haviland's place and talk with Lee. It was around this time that Lee noticed that every time he tried to leave, something came up. Later, while he talked with Lee, Lee startled him with this fact.
I know why you're fighting with Felix.
I know you're in love with my sister.
Apparently, Lee and Haviland had quite the history. Lee and Haviland were in a class together in college. Lee sent her Valentine's posing as a secret admirer. After he finally admitted to being the secret admirer, they went out on a date, but nothing came of it.
So you have no interest in Hav?
Nope.
Then why are you washing your hands with cheese?
Haviland called herself coming up with yet another excuse to keep Lee around, but when she went into his room, he wasn't there. So she decided to look through his things while she was there. Downstairs, Lee and Lee continued to talk. Lee confessed that she felt lost and unsure of her future. She's still unsure if she wants to take Haviland up on her offer to be her personal assistant or if she should stay in DC with her husband. She felt that nobody understood her.
Ah, fuck Haviland. You know, everybody goes to Haviland for advice, which is really ironic when you think about it. Because she's the most screwed up in the head out of all of you.
Very true. Very, very true. And check out this brick of a laptop. Laptops really used to be this chunky. Tell me why Haviland tried to get into his computer, but couldn't figure out the password. Why was she being so nosy? Lee tells Lee that because she didn't have a sense of purpose after she graduated and after she married her high school sweetheart, she felt even more lost. Homegirl was going through an identity crisis. And with this, Lee has a revelation.
Well, I know 3 things. First, that you're going to be very big. Second, I'm going to move to New York and take that job. And third, come here, Lee.
Now, I don't know what Lee has going on, but these women are falling for him left and right. Carolyn, Bobby, and now Lee. Lee chases him around the table to try and kiss him, and they end up getting caught by Caroline.
Just one, and I'll leave you alone.
What the hell's wrong with you?
Oh, shit.
Caroline is going to lose it. Even more so, any minute now. Lee wasted no time telling Haviland what happened, and she wasted 0 time slapping the mess out of him. For what? I don't know. She loved taking her frustration out on him in various ways. Well, Lee told Felix about that almost kiss, and Felix handled business expeditiously.
Felix!
How you doing, Mr. Buckmaster?
Damn!
Felix, he didn't do anything.
Felix was kind of fine. Lee attempts to apologize to Haviland, but Haviland wasn't having it. She spent the entire time telling everyone she didn't care about Lee, but she got pretty mad at her sister for trying something with him. Felix and Lee talk. Lee tells him that she's thinking of working for Haviland still, After everything, Felix doesn't want her to move to New York and he feels like he's losing his wife. He tells her he loves her and he leaves. After Lee and Havlin take Caroline home, they talk on the way back to the house. She asks him why he didn't kiss Caroline, and Lee told her he wasn't attracted to her, but he does admit that he was attracted to Lee. He didn't try anything with her because it wasn't the time or the place. And for some reason, after learning this man was attracted to her sister, Havlin took this and decided she was going to try Lee out that night. She met Lee in his bedroom after he took a shower and demanded that he go to her room. Lee tells us, the audience, that there wasn't going to be any lovemaking going on. He goes to her room and they hang out for a little bit, but he goes back to his room shortly after. Havlin wasn't having it though. She comes back to his room and says that if he's sleepy, he needs to come back to her room. So he goes back to her room and they lay there for a bit and talk.
How come you never tried to kiss me?
Because you have psychological problems.
What would you do if I tried to kiss you?
The bed isn't the time or the place for a first kiss.
This is the time, and this is the place.
So things get steamy, but Havlin stops them mid-session to tell him that she didn't want to have sex and then had the nerve to get upset that Lee wasn't angry about it. Isn't that what you would want in this instance?
When I'm in somebody's arms, I want to feel like the sexiest bitch alive.
So you're saying that because I'm not getting angry, you don't feel sexy?
I'm sorry, that's just how I think.
This girl was exhausting.
Was this a mistake?
If you have to ask me that, yeah, this was a mistake.
Are you angry?
Yes.
Good. Well, maybe you should go get some sleep because we do have to get up early.
Man, I just walked right into that power trip.
Yes. Yes, you did. The next day, Lee comes by to see Havlin. Lee tells her that she didn't want to be her personal assistant anymore. Havlin asks if this was because she was still angry, and child, Lee had quite the answer.
Am I angry with the one person I have worshipped, adored, emulated my entire life, only to find out in one weekend that she is a power-hungry bitch who wouldn't know a good man if he was standing in the next room? Now I know that my life is better than yours, and it took a stranger to show me that. I have licked the butt of a false idol for the past 24 years. Am I angry with you? Of course not, you twit.
As Lee leaves, she hugs Lee and tells him to leave and let Havlin be, which, looking back, was great advice. Well, Havlin finally decided to set Lee free and they head home. Lee and Felix make up. That's 90s fire right there. Yeah, buddy. When Lee and Havlin arrived at her place, Havlin tells him that she hadn't been playing games with him. That was a lie, but she doesn't know what she wants. Lee believed that she knew what she wanted and it wasn't him. He wanted to continue being friends and he thanked her for inviting him to his mom's place. Before Havlin left, she told him to call her and she'd be waiting for him to do so. The next day, Havlin returned to work. She had a surprise waiting for her on her desk, and later that day, the sender of this surprise showed up in her office. Mr. 40 Ounces of Love. Not Lee. Not Lee. They didn't even get to talk that much. People in the office kept barging in, requesting autographs and saying hi to him. It was very hard to keep Michael's attention, something she never had to worry about when it came to Lee or anyone else in her life. Michael offers to come by, pick her up, and take her to the Hamptons. Havlin was not impressed. She was hearing Michael talk and talk. The whole time it was going in one ear and out the other.
I'm on bended knee. I love you. And I want you to be my wife.
Later, Havlin makes it home. She doesn't seem to be excited or happy. She didn't get the call she was hoping for from Lee, but she did get a letter.
I'll childishly depend on these days and weeks and months to blanket that sharp sting I feel when I think of you. Why is this happening? Why do I dream of you? I've never felt simultaneous attraction and revulsion before. It's making me miserable. Eventually another hurricane will roar up and introduce herself and spin me around and around and around. And hopefully when she and I are sitting in a restaurant, she asks me what I'm thinking and I say nothing. Hopefully I won't want to say, Haviland's eyes I am thinking. Haviland's hands I am thinking. Haviland Savage I am thinking. I love you.
Haviland's friend tells her about a party that was happening later that night, and of course, Havlin opted to go since she got the response she wanted from Lee. We fast forward to a year later. Lee turned that disastrous weekend into a movie called True Love, starring some of our favorites. And the crew was mortified. Well, everyone besides Felix. After the premiere, he runs into the crew in Haviland. Turns out she didn't get married to Michael and she was now single. Lee insists that he's moved on and doesn't want to revisit whatever they had going on. Haviland admits that Lee was everything she needed and even tells him that she loves him. Lee doesn't respond. He was probably thinking it was yet another game. Babyface and Tracy Edmonds make a cameo in this film. They approach Lee to distribute his film.
I think the world needs to see True Love.
Nice to see it.
I think the film could use a more optimistic ending.
Optimism.
But other than that, you stand to make millions.
Child, she gripped the hell out of his hand when she heard millions. And this was the end of the movie, and here are my final thoughts. This was definitely a power trip disguised as a love story. Haviland wanted to have her cake and eat it too. She spent the entire movie downplaying Lee, talking bad about him to her friends and even her own sister, making sure everybody knew that he wasn't shit. A pathological liar, a charity case, someone she could never be interested in. And yet she was still keeping her own mess under wraps. She didn't tell Lee she was still talking to Michael, the same man who cheated on her. She wanted everyone to think her life was together, that her relationship was still solid, even when it clearly wasn't. And I truly believe she used Lee. She used him as a buffer at brunch so she wouldn't have to answer questions about Michael. She dragged him to her grandmother's house for the same reason. But what she didn't expect was for her grandmother to look at Lee and say, "That's your husband." That threw her all the way off. Now, say what you want about Lee. Yes, he was homeless, and yes, he was down bad. But I do think he was a good guy at his core. He was focused on bettering himself, and I can respect the fact that he avoided dating because he wanted to get his life together first. I also like that he didn't let Haviland get away with anything. Every time she tried to manipulate or deflect, he called her out. When she brushed off her sister, he took the time to talk to Lee and actually listen to her. But what's funny is that Haviland spent the whole movie acting like Lee was beneath her until she started noticing other women were interested in him. Then suddenly she started to wonder if she was missing out. Or maybe it wasn't even about Lee at all. Maybe she just needed to confirm that she could have him if she wanted him. Either way, it was never coming from a genuine place. She literally dragged this man to her room, made out with him, then got mad when he wasn't mad that she didn't want to sleep with him. Like, what? It was almost like she needed to provoke him to make him prove something to her. And once she finally did get under his skin, she was satisfied and left him alone. And I think once she got that letter from Lee confirming that he had feelings for her and more feelings for her than for her sister, she was satisfied with that. The whole thing with her and Lee, her sister, that was weird. Some strange underlying jealousy that I still don't fully understand, but I am glad that Lee chose her marriage over being Haviland's personal assistant. Lee was right about one thing. Haviland had more issues than anybody else. And the real kicker, she only took Lee seriously after he started to win. After he made a movie, after he was on his way up, after he had people interested in his work and possibly a major distribution deal on the table. Sound familiar? Lee basically became the new Michael. And if we're being honest, even if they had ended up together, I think it would have always been a gain to her. And that is just not worth it. Anyways, thanks for watching this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. If there's a movie or show you'd like for me to recap, please click the link in the description to submit your request. As for the next review, all I'm going to say is 2001. This movie stars a nepo baby actress turned overbearing talk show host and an actress gone too soon that shares my first name. This movie is a stark reminder that motherhood isn't for everyone, and no matter how hard you try, sometimes some cycles repeat themselves. See you next time, guys. Bye.